what should be form of organization? Like example, society, trust, or Section 8?
If you're going to be a charitable trust, and
Mhm.
if you're going to be governed by the Maharashtra Public Trust Act, then it has to be a charitable trust. Now, of course, the definition of public trust involves the society registered under the Indian Registration Act 1860 as well, and the trust which is express trust or a constructive trust. So these are types of organizations that can be registered as a public charitable trust or a religious trust under Maharashtra Public Trust Act.
How objects should be drafted? Like, can it provide that?
Well, importantly, when you are drafting the objects, three things you ought to keep in mind. First, what is the objective for which you are going to create the trust? What is the purpose for which you are going to want the money of the trust to be utilized? That is the first objective that you must keep in mind. It shouldn't be very unclear. It shouldn't be of too many details that will give rise to further ambiguities, because that will give rise to further confusion. If you are going to use too many clauses and too many conditions and too many ifs and buts for the purposes of at the time of drafting the objectives of the trust. So you should keep your objectives very clean, very simple, and very easy to understand for a readers from a reader's perspective. That is first thing. Secondly, you must mention, according to me, the way in which the trustees are appointed, because if the trustees are not appointed, if there is no mechanism provided in the trustee for the purposes of appointment of new trustees, then the matter will go to charity commissioner, and the charity commissioner will take donkey's years to just to get your appointment done. So according to me, you should also keep in mind to have the manner of appointment of new trustees mentioned in the trustee. Third is the way in which you are going to accept the resignation, accept the eventualities wherein the trustees may vacate the seats of the trusteeship. That also should be mentioned. For example, generally trustees, the seat of the trustee will fall vacant if he is out of India for a period more than 6 months. Then, if he naturally becomes insane or stupid, then third is he is declared insolvent. Fourth, of course, upon him submitting his letter of resignation. These are the four basic things and or eventualities under which a seat of trustee will fall vacant. Now, that is also third thing you should keep in mind at the time of drafting. Fourth thing is the description of the properties that the trust has, the public trust has. In any case, when you're going to file for registration, the memorandum of registration or memorandum of trust will require all these things to be mentioned. But these are three or four things that you must keep in mind: objectives, the manner of appointment of new trustees. If you don't have the trustees as the people who are going to run the trust, and if you have the plan to appoint an advisory committee or a managing committee for the trust, then you must also mention how this managing committee will function. All right. Then fourth, as I mentioned, what happens in the case of resignation of a particular trustee and how the resignations are accepted. And yes, and fifth, most important is the meetings, how the meetings of the trustees should be conducted, how many times a year they should be conducted, and the manner of conducting the meetings, in the sense that how the minutes of the meetings are to be maintained and who should be the chairman. So these are basic things that one must keep in mind at the time of drafting of trust.
Is there any model bylaws available for the society to be formed?
Model bylaws for the society means, look, if for a society to be registered as a public trust, you have to get the registration under Indian Society Registration Act, which is 1860, not the Maharashtra Cooperative Societies Act. So whatever are the objectives of the trust, or whatever is the deed of trust that you propose to register, that same deed you can use as a bylaws. There is no modern bylaws as they are for the purposes of housing societies when it comes to Maharashtra Cooperative Societies Act. Therefore, there are no bylaws per se for a trust or a society which is registered under Indian Society Registration Act. So that is it.
Is it advisable to have advisory committee?
In the sense that advisory committee, look, now there are so many trusts that for whom I have appeared, but none of them, really speaking, had any advisory committee. For example, Bombay Pasi Panchayat is a trust where everything is being looked after by the trustees. They meet every once in every week, and they take all the administrative and substantial decision and policy decisions in that meeting. So advisory committee, it's basically advisory committee. Even if you want to appoint, the functions and jurisdiction of advisory committee should always be kept very minimum, according to me.
Right.
That will help streamline the functions of the trust.
Can it be provided in the deed that donors or the nominees are not required to be elected but would be selected?
Yeah, yes, you can. You can always preserve the right or reserve the right of a present trustee of choosing an outgoing incoming trustee. So one who goes will or can be given right to appoint a new trustee in his place. But of course, who should be appointed is something that you should always provide in the trust. In the sense that if you let's take an example of Baba Trust. So in Baba Trust, it is always a descendant of Baba family who should be elected as a trustee. You see, so like that, you should always have the inbuilt checks so as to ensure that no third party or rather no person who is unwanted, really speaking, or unnecessary in terms of the functioning of the trust, in terms of the constitution of the trust, comes into the trust and takes over the trust. That also may be the objective of the author of the trustee. So that should also be protected and kept in mind at the time of giving such powers to the trustees for the purposes of appointment of new trustees.
So, if it is Pan India NGO, which state would be suitable for HO? Is it correct that all states of India do not have laws governing charity?
Not really. I mean, I have so far dealt with Maharashtra and Gujarat,
Mhm.
and for a matter or two, I have dealt with the laws of Kerala or the temple thing. But yes, if you ask me, the promptness of charity commissioner, I have seen or I have experienced that the charity commissioner in Maharashtra, especially Mumbai region, is much more active and prompt when you compare the Office of Charity Commissioner situated in Kerala. So, if you ask me, of course, I'm going to tell you that its headquarters should always be better to be in Maharashtra. And
Right.
because the charity commissioners appointed under the Maharashtra Public Trust Act are always given wide and very strong powers per se, substantial powers per se to supervise the functionings of the trust.
If a trust is registered in state where there is no law governing charity, if it wants to do some activity in Maharashtra, will it have to get registered?
Registered in Maharashtra, yes. You can't have that's. You will have to, as long as your property is situated, your functions are going to be in Maharashtra. You will be subjected to.
So, if a trust is registered in Maharashtra and some of its income and activities are in other states like
Hmm.
Madhya Pradesh,
Hmm.
can income earned outside Maharashtra reduced in Form 9C?
That I may not be able to answer because it pertains to income tax. But I'll tell you, as long as this income concerns the income from other estates situated outside the state of Maharashtra, when
Mhm.
you file your audited by balance sheets, those incomes will still have to be disclosed to this charity commissioner. So those incomes can still be subject matter of inquiry under Section 37.
What are the exemptions or concessions available to NGOs in state of Maharashtra, like stamp duty, municipal taxes, electricity tariff?
I have not come across anything which gives an absolute exemption to NGOs. But yes, if you apply to the state for exemption under Section 1, then Section 1 of Maharashtra Public Trust Act, then certain exemptions can be granted by the state government. But that's still and yet a discretionary power vested with the government. And insofar as the electricity is concerned, I think according to me, the electricity can be charged at a lower rate, but of course, that is also subject to the provisions of the Maharashtra State Electricity Boards Act, that is Electricity Act. And insofar as the municipal tax is concerned, that is going to be subjected as a subject matter of the powers of MCGM or BMC, whichever is the case. So that's it. I mean,
Should an NGO prepare report of its activities on lines of report of directors in case of companies?
once you file the balance sheet with the charity commissioner, you will have to mention how you have spent the income. So that itself will mean that you will have to give sort of a report of the functionings or sorry, not functioning functions of the trustees that they have undertaken during a particular period. And you will, I mean, that report that is filed under Section 34 or 35, if I'm not mistaken, that report will disclose what work you have done, how you have achieved the objectives, how have you spent the money of the trust so as to achieve the objective, So that report, yes, you can say that that report is akin to director's report on the Companies Act.
So if you can just highlight a few landmark cases.
Look, I'll tell you a
Mhm.
couple of cases. Like it's I don't. There's one 1970 judgment of the Supreme Court where the Supreme Court, for the first time, perhaps said that every public charitable trust's properties are public property, and you have to be very careful while you're dealing with the public property. When you are inviting tenders for sale of public properties, you always seek AMD. Likewise, when you are initiating the sale of properties of the public charitable trust, you should start this method of inviting or asking the proposed purchasers to deposit EMD, earnest money deposit, which should not be less than 25% of the value of the property. So that is the landmark judgment, and from there on, in every sale that is supervised or done under the auspices of the charity commissioner, in every such sale, generally charity commissioner puts a condition that every proposed purchaser who intends to buy the property of the trust first should deposit the earnest money value of the property, which should not be less than 25%, in the office of the charity commissioner, and then should put its bid. Now, what happens is under Section 36, it's not as if the trust goes to the charity commissioner and seeks the permission. When trust goes to the charity commissioner, they apply, and thereafter the trust gives an advertisement and invites public offers. Public bidding takes place in the office of the charity commissioner. So every bidder has to deposit that 25% of the EMD and then put its bid. So that was the starting point of this entire process, that how the public or the properties of the public trust can fetch the ultimate or rather the optimal value. So that is one judgment. Then likewise there are various judgments. So to say the least, there is a judgment, I think 1973 Supreme Court, where the Supreme Court said that political activities can't be considered as the charitable activities. So any trust which is departing political knowledge or some political awareness of a particular party, those trusts can't be registered as a public charitable trust under the Maharashtra Public Trust Act, at least. And there are many, Ashank. To list a few, I mean, it will be difficult, honestly speaking. For every section, there is a good judgment. There is a novel, or rather, there is a very important judgment. So one can't just list a couple of important cases. But yes, now we deal with the Section 36 disputes, Section 41 disputes. Then of course this Shailesh Builders is the one that is very important in terms of Section 36. Then there is this Nanavati Trust case that talks about what are the powers under Section 41A and 41E that are given to the charity commissioner so as to ensure that properties of the trust are protected by issuing appropriate orders. So these are just a few amongst many that I can think of right now, like of the hand, of the thought.
Right.
But Chaitanya, during this lockdown, were the changes, like how was it implemented? Like
Changes was
something
that.
that you can highlight.
Look now, naturally, because during the lockdown, in the sense that as on today, if you ask me what is the condition of the charity commissioner's office, look, except non-contested matters where the changes are accepted by each one of them who is interested in the trust, and the changes in the sense applications filed for bringing on record change do not invite any objections. All those proceedings are going smoothly, but
Okay.
where there are objections, where there are contentious issues to be decided by the charity commissioner or the assistant charity commissioner or deputy charity commissioner, as the case may be, those matters are yet to be taken up on proper basis, on regular basis, I would say.
Oh, so they're suffering almost for a year now.
Almost for a year, yes. But yes, your statutory compliances are still being sought for. So trusts are required to file the audited balance sheets. Trusts are required to file an applications for 36 if they want to deal with their properties. Those things are going on. But the only thing is, decision making process has not, brought back to its normalcy as it was prior to lockdown.
Oh, so no relaxation in compliance per se, right?
No relaxation as such. I mean, there may be, in the sense, by virtue of this new act, they have brought in a change where you can file a change report online. Now
Yeah.
there is a change brought in by amendment where you can file your balance sheets also online. So,
Yeah.
and plus the entire office is under the process of digitization. So all the officers are, in that sense, taking time to digitize the awards, in the sense, all the proceedings and everything. So that's happening under the amendments that are brought in 2019.
Okay.
So that's about it. I mean, exemptions are not many exemptions are granted per se. In any case, I mean, you have the benefit of ATG, so I don't know what else and more the charity commissioner could have been given exemption from.
Can the public charitable trust donate to another NGO which is registered under Section 8?
You can donate, you can do all these activities provided your trust deed permits that. If your trust deed doesn't permit donations, then you can't donate. And in any case, I'll tell you, even for collection of donations, you will have to procure the permission of the charity commissioner in accordance with 41B, if I'm not mistaken. So donations is not that simple. You will still have to take and procure permission of the charity commissioner. And if and as long as your question of giving donation is concerned, I mean, one public charitable trust donating to other NGO, then that has to be mentioned in the objectives of the trust. If it's very well mentioned, if it's very well in that sense codified in the deed, trust deed, then you can go ahead and mention. You go ahead and donate. But that is subject to inquiry if the charity commissioner is doubting that it's entire humbug, that you are just under the garb of donation, you are just trying to sort of take away the money of the trust, then naturally you will be subjected to penalizing sections of the trust act.
Is any kind of insolvency law applicable to NGOs?
No, not yet. You're really speaking, one can file against a company, but one cannot file against an NGO. So if, for example, NGO has taken money, NGO has done work, and and someone owes money to NGO, which is more than 1 crore, then naturally you can go and file insolvency proceedings. But it has to be against a company eventually.
Can an employee or an agency be appointed, who is paid a percentage of donation as remuneration?
No. Look, eventually it depends on what your trust deed says, but I don't think this can be permitted, because then it's the simplest way of showing the expenses is just keep appointing employees and keep giving them money. So eventually you have to see whether what is the purpose for which the trust has taken birth, and more importantly, whether the money is being utilized for that for that purpose. That chain has to be complete. I mean, you can't just keep, giving money.
Can employee be given a project-based appointment?
Does the project achieve the objective of the trust? You will have to link it to the trust deed. You can't have an independent expenditure and say that this was for the trust and therefore I am allowed to utilize the money of the trust. You will have to, your eventual logic has to be that yes, this money was spent for the purposes of objectives of the trust. To put your example in perspective, if let's say that assignment per se is for the purposes of the objectives of the trust, then you can. Otherwise, you can't.
So assuming we are just working on project A in the trust itself, and that project, for some or the other reason, we have to stop the project.
Okay.
So just based on that specific project, can we do an appointment?
Yeah, I mean,
specifically for that project.
Yes, but was the project in first place initiated for achieving the objectives of the trust, purposes of the trust?
Yes.
Then you can.